Hey, welcome back to another Relatively Damaged Live. I'm Angela, and this is
Kat.
The live shows are currently streamed on Mondays to Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Please remember to follow and subscribe, share with your friends, all the great things. On the Monday segment of the show, Kat and I discuss topics we find interesting for about 30 minutes, and I totally hijacked the show, guys. I'm not going to deny it. It's so about my poetry book, Poems from a Lost Soul. And we're going to talk about what a poem is today. And if you want, you can go down into the doobly-doo. I like how Scott Carney calls it the doobly-doo. And there is a link if you would like to buy pre-order my book, Poems from a Lost Soul. So with that said, you guys, the very first poem in my book was one I wrote in elementary school called A Poem. And I don't totally agree with it, but I will read it to you. A poem. A poem is a kind of little story that sometimes tickles your heart. Though I must say, poems are the best kind of little story to read. You can read it, you can sing it, and you can laugh at it. A poem is a person's best friend, and sometimes a good, heartening little story. By me as a child in elementary school. So this dream has been, 40 years in the making.
And I am excited for you to see where it's going. I'll just say I've had a sneak peek, and it's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so that leads us to what is a poem. I mean, some of that stuff actually is true, but it doesn't really, I don't think, give the true essence of what a poem is or what poetry is.
I would agree with that statement.
Yeah. I mean, I like to think, in a sense, song lyrics are almost, poetry.
I think they are.
Yeah. And some of them are really good and some of them are really bad. But if you put it with a catchy tune, it doesn't matter about the bad lyrics.
Well, and does a poem, because I'm not sure a poem has to rhyme. In fact,
No.
I don't think it has to rhyme. I have a few poems. And one of them I think I specifically called, "Is this a poem?" Like, is it even a poem? I have no idea. But it came out, and that's what it was created as. So it's a very abstract in the way it's designed. And and that which leaves it up to interpretation.
Mm-hmm. Well, like, there are certain poetry forms, sonnets, haikus, and one of my favorite, limericks. Because we all know about the man from Nantucket. I'm just going to say it. And so yes, those have certain forms, and there's a certain way that they have to be expressed, and things like that. And of course, rhyming couplets and all that kind of stuff. I'm not an expert in poetry by any stretch of the means. Of course, this is just my recollection from studying way back when, and having an English teacher for a wife. So a little bit.
Well, one of the hoops I had to get through because it was real. I mean, I was really scared. This is poetry that I wrote growing up, throughout my life, where I pondered other people's lives, or I pondered my life, and like I said, they didn't come out always looking a certain way. And I, at one point, I think I was meditating, and it came to me. It was like, it didn't matter. It was poetry, and how is something new going to be created if I don't just show it to the world, you know? And some people will like it, and some people won't. Some of those poems do not fit any of those categories that you're talking about.
Hmm. Well, in my experience, so I'm going to bring in some of my worldly experience. So as a librarian, we often got requests for poetry books, and so we were buying poetry books, much like yours. And um, as was my wont, I would browse through them and look and see what's going on. And most of poetry being written today is that kind of uh, I think it's very careful word choice to express a certain idea or emotion um, that's really trying to come across in
Mhm.
something. Um, that's in my preview of your book. That's what I really kind of caught. It was a very emotional experience because in that moment, although it was up to interpretation because I don't know the circumstances which the poem arose from, but
Mhm.
I had that emotion evoked in me.
Mm. Oh, that's
And
so, oh, I love that you read that. You have no idea, because the poetry written from my heart, from my soul, um, I know it can be interpreted so many different ways. And what I really pray for, hope for, meditate for, whatever you want to call it, is that when each person reads it, that they can really sink into their heart, really find some place in their life where they had an experience maybe similar to that, um, and that it's relatable. It was
mhm.
so important to me too. And that's kind of scary, to share something relatable, to share that depth of my heart is a bit terrifying.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm just going to go to one of my favorite poems is by Albert Noyes. It's called The Highwayman. So
Mm.
it's dated. It's from I believe the 18th century. I'd have to look that up exactly. And I had read the poem, and then I had, if any of you are familiar with Lorena McKennitt, she often takes poetry and expresses it musically. So she may alter the words slightly so that they'll fit musically, um, but she does it with such skill that it comes. And every time I listen to that song, like if I'm ever in a mood to cry, I just do. And it's basically a love story, a tragic love
Mm.
story. It's kind of like a Romeo and Juliet kind of uh, with a twist kind of thing. But but it is that emotion, and for an artist, a musician that's skillful, that they can take the essence of the poem and weave it musically so that that you double that, you double that.
Mhm.
And here's the thing about poetry. I mean, I told you as I was going through it, and I haven't finished the book yet, but I read them aloud because I think poetry is really meant to be read aloud. There's something about the pause, the intonation, that the author, if the author's reading it, they know what emotion was evoked in them to put these words on paper,
Yeah.
and can say something. So the way I may read something is very different. I mean, you and I are in a book study together, and the way we read prose is different. The way we
Yeah.
emphasize words is different. And I think as we read in that book study, each reader is different. So if I read your poem, I'm going to, in a sense, put my essence into that poem, because
Yeah.
I'm reading it because I'm having an interpretation of that,
Right.
of what it evokes in me. And so what it evokes in me, and I think that's the essence of a good poem, is that it's specific enough to evoke an emotion in someone, but it's that connection. So your connection to the poem, you wrote it, but it also came from a place within you. And a good poem will evoke a response in me and be able to connect a place in me to that poem.
Which is so beautiful. I love how you said that. And I'm going to put Jan's comment on the screen because I think it's true. He says, and by the way, hello, Jan. In
Hi,
elementary
Jen.
school, it was all about the memorization, i.e., the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. And in high school, it was all about what does this mean? To me, it can mean different things to different people based on our life experiences, which is exactly what you were talking about, Kat. And
Mm-hmm.
furthermore, I would like to add in that, like you were saying, it evokes something in you.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that is also a good poem, one that evokes something in someone, whether good or bad, or let's see, helpful or unhelpful, as I like to say sometimes about emotions. Um, but it's also, there's a translation that happens when
Mm-hmm.
someone reads my poetry. It is actually translated inside of them into a whole new creation. And that's what I'm most intrigued in. I can't wait to hear feedback from, is what happens inside of someone when they read that poetry. What did it remind them of? What was that visceral sensation? Did it create a pit in their stomach? Did it bring joy to their heart? Did they want to throw the book down and say, screw it? You know, like what happened? Because I think sometimes that's exactly how I felt. Life is hell and it's hard. And who is God? And does God exist? And how come I'm over here? And how come that person is homeless? And I mean, what about rape and suicide, and imagining those feelings that come with all of those things, and just really diving deeply into what does that mean to me? And how can
Mm-hmm.
I express it? I was looking at some of them. I don't know if this one, I think this one is in the book, but it's about mom. And my mom worked all the time. And I missed my mom. It's like at the end of the poem, it's talking about what's missing. And it was mom. It was, could it be mom or mother? I can't remember exactly how I said it, but for many years I have walked around. Now, Kat and I talked before the show, and we both had ideas of what the first poem was in the book. And so when I thought she said poem number one, I thought she meant the one from my elementary school. And when she said number one, here's that translation thing, right? She meant the introduction poem, which is the poem that introduces the book. And it goes like this: this pain, my suffering, sat in a box, carried from place to place until I could face it, process it, accept it, love it, until it seamlessly assimilated with my heart, and I became whole. Like it's like a declaration. This is,
Mm-hmm.
I am whole. Like,
Yes, that's the one I wanted. That's the one I meant by number one. And that's why when I read that, I was floored, because really, in a sense, it for me, it evokes the journey of life, and how we want to be. Do we want to live and grow, or do we want to just bury all of that stuff in the past? And being able to say, yes, I've carried that until I was ready to examine it and to
mm,
hold it in my heart. And then it's really, it's really for me, in a sense, it's almost most a challenge, to not bury those things, hold them, but until I'm ready to look at them, and
Yeah.
then
Well, and
know the growth that will come from them.
yeah, this is, I think, also a celebration of that growth. But the funny thing is, I literally did carry these poems in a plastic bin, a storage bin with my yearbooks and my childhood memories and things like that. And I mean, I'm trying to think of all the places that box went with me, because I hadn't written poetry after my disability came on until probably about a year or two ago, I think, when I wrote Relatively Damaged, that I posted for Disability Pride Month. Um, and it's like something just opened back up, like I could look at these things again. But how many different apartments did I live in? I had been married. I had had kids. I had been through multiple floods, 3 different floods in one apartment complex, moving from apartment to apartment. I had been out of home and back again. I had lived with a friend of mine who actually passed away in July, and that broke my heart. And I'm remembering some of these creations around all of that life. It's almost like putting this book together is almost, for me, like writing a memoir. And the interesting thing is, there were many times in my life that I started to put them together, to put them, to assimilate them into a book, and it didn't get done. And the interesting thing is that it did get, now that it's getting done, because it's a series of 3 books, that my caregivers helped me. So it was first allowing someone who I trusted and loved to see them, to help put them into the computer. And then it was saying, okay, I'm going to, I think it took a year after that of even processing enough to where, okay, now they can get into the right program. And then I had to get help again, so multiple people saw this poetry. And I think as they were looking at it and reading it and going, oh my gosh, wow, I so relate, that was what I needed to go, okay, I can share this. It's okay to share this. I feel naked when I share this, I feel vulnerable when I share this. And how can I not share it when it's touching them on such a deep soul level? How could I keep that to myself? It's the gift God gave me, or the one, or the universe, however you want to look at it. I use all those words. How could I step back and not give that to the world? That to me would be selfish. And I don't want to be selfish with it anymore. I'm willing to take the risk to be judged, I think.
Mm, mm. And I can understand that. I mean, here it is again. I mean, I like how you said it. It tells a story. It tells your story. It's a memoir of sorts. It's a memoir of the feelings, the emotions, and not the details of what happened. And then I felt like this. It was in a sense, an emotional memoir.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah, and
true.
instead
Yeah,
of
because
a factual.
because all those things didn't happen to me. Sometimes they were things that other people were telling me about that I'm trying to understand and relate to.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to empathize. Oh, what would that be like? I don't know what that would be like. Let me see if I can figure it out. So it was almost my way of processing. Well, actually, that's a really good way to put it. It was my way of processing the world around me.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and so we're taking this. So for your very first poem that you shared with us earlier. I mean, that was your first poem you wrote. You
Mm-hmm.
know, but it was the child. You know, and as a child we thought like a child, we acted like a child, and our thought patterns were like that. but the emotional maturity, the involvement, and what you said, it's a book of three, a set of three, and as you're coming out of it, you change, because your poetry changes, your journey has changed. You've shared with me some of your more recent poems, which I'm assuming are going to be in the last book.
They are, yeah.
Yeah. And so, reading your early work, and I know a bit of your story, not just the emotional story, but the what's behind it, because we've shared that. I can see I see this picture, so I know certain things, but then I see the emotions behind it, and the evolving and the growth, and because I know you, it for me makes the poetry that much more beautiful.
Thank you.
But it completely stands by itself.
Right.
Because we don't need to know the details of your journey, because we can all relate to those emotions.
Right.
We can all relate to the evocation of those primal feelings within inside of us that come out and present themselves. And that's what makes it so relatable. I think that's what makes well-written poetry relatable, is that because it can mean different things to different people.
Yeah.
But at the same time, everybody can grasp onto something if they've had any kind of emotional life.
Yeah, that's true. You're making me think, as you're talking about life, I was thinking about how when I sent over the poetry for you to get a preview, and you asked if it was in any particular order, and I said, no, it's in the order of life. And would you say that's true? I mean, did you feel like, oh, she's getting healed and then something happens, or like did it help the way that it was? Did you understand that was the process of reading the book, that it was like life?
Yeah, very, very much so. I mean, what we talk about here on this show, I mean, we've talked about things that have come up and that we felt we've had to address them. Other times, well, things are going well, and we just bring something that maybe that we've been chewing on for a while, or we'll see a quote and it comes and evokes something in us. That, in a sense, is very much how life is. I mean, what we're doing here every Monday is a reflection of life, as is your book. It's just a greater time frame of that, since these poems have been written over time. And my allergies are going to kick in any minute. Thank you. So yeah, I really do see that, and I think any good poetry book is going to take us on a journey. Especially depending on how it's edited. You can't throw a limerick here, a sonnet there, a random, haiku there without any meaning. I mean, it's got to be, that's the trick, I think, in editing poetry. And I am not an editor.
Right.
So, but it's the kind of thing, I know what I like when I see it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too. Like, I really had to sit with this, and did it need a particular order? Did it need chapters? Did it need, and the answer I kept getting was, leave it in the order that it was written, as it had been in stacks of poems. So as best I know, it's in chronological order of how it was written, or at least close to it. And I think that's okay. It didn't have to be clean and perfect and tied up in a perfect little box, because that's not how life is. It's that that life is messy and things can be good and bad. I can feel lost and found. I can have joy in the midst of a struggle. How do you do that? Things like that, all those emotions. I can yearn for love and think I have love, but maybe not really, like.
Yes, yes, I totally get it. And that's what that's why I connected with it, because that's how my life has been, ups and downs, joys and struggles, and sometimes all mixed and jumbled together. you know you know wh- the probably one of the biggest questions of life is, what is love?
Mm, that's a fantastic question. I just can say it transcends time and space. That's all I can say about love.
Well, we could do a whole series of shows on that question.
Yeah, yeah,
um
yeah.
but
And
but but that's something that we always struggle with. And let's just speak briefly on that, because that's the theme of some of the poems in there, is that our idea changes as our experience changes, as we
mm-hmm.
interact with other people, as we have different kinds of love.
Right.
um we come to an understanding that's much deeper, much more uh, what do I want to say? It has a deeper meaning and a deeper breath based on the experiences that we have. And so, so I see that, I've seen that evolution in there about either the love poems and the questioning, what is love? Am I seeing this? And, that, like I said, that's just kind of, one of the themes, because oftentimes, I mean, that's what people are searching for in life.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
I
it's
think
all,
so.
yeah, it's all about
Yeah.
understanding it.
Well, yeah, and if you don't know it, or life precluded showing it to you at an early age, or everyone just did the best they could, but then there's even, I think too, sometimes everyone will do the best that they can, and there's still those questions. What is this?
Hmm.
What does it feel like? What does it look like? What do I come to expect out of life? And
Right.
it's just so, the growing up and living life is hard, and it's
Yeah.
beautiful, and it's
Right.
scary.
And sometimes we're lost, and sometimes we're found.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Mm.
Yeah.
Well, just to come back to the poem, I love looking at the a poem.
And I love
Because
the little elementary school artwork.
yeah, it is elementary school artwork. I love it. Um, that my belief was that it was that all poems were supposed to tickle our hearts. They were supposed to bring us joy, and that they're the best kind of little stories. And yes, you can read it, you can sing it, you can laugh at it, and that they can be someone's best friend. And I think that, and then the last part talks about sometimes a good, heartening little story. And I think that they are all of those things. And I didn't realize as a child it was going to be also pain and suffering. And how do you have a story without struggle and triumph? And that, I think, is really what this is about. Like, yes, there are some beautiful, fun poems, I think. And then there's the real visceral struggle
Mhm.
and triumph that happens in the book, Poems from a Lost Soul. So we'll be talking about this more this month. We have a couple of other poems that we will be able to talk about as topics. So thanks for having this conversation with me, Kat. Thanks for
Oh,
participating with me on this platform so that we could do this. I love getting to have these conversations with you.
well, thank you. I mean, it's just beautiful. I love how we can, bring all this together. And I'm grateful that you've allowed me to be a small part of your journey in getting this out.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad that you've been part of my journey. I'm glad everyone's been a part of my journey. I feel really lucky and really honored with the people in my life sharing this journey. Again, if interested, or no, go buy the book now. It's on pre-order. Down in the doobly-doo, there's a link that will take you to the website, and you can pre-order the book right now on Amazon as an ebook. It will also be in paperback. It's just not there yet, so don't worry, it's coming. So just so you guys know, there's also a Relatively Damaged podcast where I interview amazing guests who've overcome some sort of struggle in their life and how they found hope and healing. You can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple, and many more. The book is not only going to be on Kindle, so Poems from a Lost Soul will be on Kindle, and we're going to also put it on Apple and Google Books, as well as the paperback version will be out there. So keep a watch out for that. I'm Angela.
And I'm Kat. We'll see you next week.